Imagine you were 12 years old, your belly empty since yesterday, and your hands raw from scrubbing laundry for a neighbor in exchange for a single stale roll. Your father is gone, perhaps to the grave, perhaps to the docks. You're not sure, and your mother has whispered that there is no more bread in the cupboard. She has found you work. At dawn, she walks you through the narrow, sooty streets of East London, where chimney smoke clings to the air like an unwelcome fog. You pass rows of brick tenements, where washing lines hang limp with clothes that will never be fully clean. Ahead, there is a squat, brick building with faded white letters. Bryant and May Match Factory. The largest in London. Hundreds of girls work here, your mother tells you. It will keep you fed, she says, if you work hard. The factory bell clangs. You step inside. The smell hits you first. Sharp, chemical, stinging the back of your throat. You cough, and a forewoman glares. No coughing on the floor, she snaps. It slows the work. You're shown to a long wooden bench. Piles of thin, pale splints of wood sit in front of you. Beside them, bowls of a thick, yellow paste. This is white phosphorus, the heart of every match, and the silent enemy you don't yet understand. Dip the splints in the paste. Quick even, the forewoman says. Don't get it on your clothes, and don't touch your mouth. She doesn't explain why. You plunge your first handful of splints into the paste. Your fingertips burn faintly. The girl beside you, perhaps 15, leans in and mutters, "It'll make your teeth ache soon enough." Her smile reveals a gap where 2 teeth should be. By midday your fingers are stiff, your stomach twists from the chemical stink, and you've learned that you may not leave your seat except for one break. A few minutes to gulp down tea if you have it, and eat whatever food you've brought. You have none, so you watch the others. When the day ends, the paste has crusted under your fingernails, and a strange ache blooms in your jaw. You tell yourself it's only from clenching your teeth all day. But it isn't. The second day is worse. You arrive at the factory gates before sunrise, breath puffing white in the cold. The forewoman's voice slices the morning air. You're late if you're not here before the bell. Inside, the air is already thick, with the sour-sweet smell of white phosphorus. It clings to your skin, your hair, your clothes, as though the factory itself is swallowing you whole. The hours stretch like a punishment. 6 in the morning to 6 at night. Sometimes longer, if the foreman decides an order must be finished. There is no clock you can see, only the rhythm of dipping splints into the yellow paste, shaking off the excess, laying them to dry, and beginning again. Your back aches from hunching, your hands burn from the phosphorus, and your stomach always empty. For all this, you are paid perhaps 4 shillings a week. If the forewoman doesn't find fault with your work, that's barely enough for bread and a bit of dripping to share at home. If you make a mistake, spill the paste, or arrive late, a fine is taken from your wages. Sometimes you leave with nothing at all. It's not just the low pay, it's the rules. No talking, no sitting unless at your bench, no asking questions. The girl beside you, the one missing teeth, tells you about Phossy jaw. Starts as a toothache, she whispers when the forewoman's back is turned. Then your gums swell, turn black, bone rots away. You'll stink so bad, they'll send you home to die. You laugh nervously, hoping she's joking. But then you see another girl, maybe 16, her scarf pulled up to hide the lower half of her face. You catch a glimpse, a patch of skin the color of bruised parchment, teeth missing, jaw uneven, and the work doesn't stop. The phosphorus eats at you slowly, but the foreman's eyes are sharp. Any girl who slows is shouted at, fined, or fired. Lunch break, if you can call it that, is 10 minutes. You eat bread with phosphorus-covered fingers, because there's no place to wash them properly. Some girls lose their appetites entirely. Others eat because they have no choice. The paste works its way into your food, your mouth, your blood. By the end of the week, your jaw aches constantly. You tell yourself it's nothing. The older girls tell you it's only just begun. In the match factory, mistakes are not just accidents, they're debts. It happens to you by your second week. You spill a tray of freshly dipped splints, the sticky phosphorus paste splattering across the bench and floor. The forewoman's eyes snap to yours like a hawk spotting prey. "You'll pay for that," she says flatly. And you will. Not in apology. In money. The cost of the wasted materials is taken straight from your week's pay, leaving you with barely enough for bread. If you protest, they double the fine for insolence. Some girls keep quiet and accept the deduction. Others try to hide their mistakes, sweeping broken matches into their aprons, shoving ruined batches into the furnace. But if you're caught hiding damage, that's instant dismissal. The factory owners, men you never see, write these rules from the comfort of their warm offices. But it's the foremen and forewomen who enforce them, their own jobs hanging on keeping the girls in line. There are more humiliations than fines. If your fingers are too slow, you're called lazy loud enough for the whole room to hear. If you yawn or stretch, you're told you must think this is a holiday. If your hands shake, you're told to get out before you waste more matches. One day, you watch a younger girl, no more than 13, being marched to the manager's office. She'd coughed too much during her shift. The phosphorus dust and fumes make all of you cough. But hers was too frequent, too noticeable. She is told to go home and come back when she can work without disturbing others. Everyone knows she won't come back. The older girls talk about Bryant and May, the biggest match company in London. They've heard stories of workers fined for dropping matches, for being late, even for the sin of going to the toilet too often. In 1888, some girls there had finally had enough. They went on strike, marching through the East End to demand better pay, no more unfair fines, and safer conditions. But for every strike you hear about, there are dozens of factories where no one dares speak out. Because here, in this building, you are replaceable. If you quit, there are 10 more girls at the gate tomorrow morning, willing to work for less than you. So you keep your head down, your eyes on the splints, and you pray the forewoman's gaze passes over you. Because in this place, the smallest mistake can cost you your week's food, or your job entirely. You've heard whispers about it since your first day in the match factory. The older girls lower their voices when they say the words, as if speaking them too loudly might invite the curse. Phossy jaw. At first, you don't believe the stories. They sound like something out of a nightmare. But then you meet Annie. Annie used to be one of the quickest hands in the room, dipping splints, turning them, setting them to dry with the speed of a magician. Now she sits near the door, not working, her scarf pulled high over her mouth. Even so, the smell reaches you. It's a sweet, sickly odor, like rotting fruit mixed with something metallic. You know, without asking, that it's coming from her. One day, she lifts the scarf to sip some water, and you see it. Her jaw is swollen, grotesquely, the skin stretched, shiny over the bone. Her teeth on one side are gone, leaving a gaping space. Her gums are white in places, black in others. You've seen bruises, you've seen cuts, but this is something alive, eating her from the inside. The older women explain it to you. The phosphorus paste you handle every day, the fumes you breathe for hours, can seep into your teeth and jawbone. At first, there's just an ache, maybe a little swelling. But then the bone begins to rot. It doesn't heal. Sometimes the flesh over the bone breaks open, and the dead bone turns black, crumbling away. The pain is constant, throbbing deep into the skull, and the smell never leaves. The cure, if you can call it that, is to have the diseased bone cut out. Some girls go to the hospital, but that means no wages while you recover, and few can afford it. Others simply stop coming to work and waste away at home. You remember what happened to Ellen Murphy, not in your factory, but in the papers. She was only 17 when her jaw started to ache. By the time she was taken to the hospital, they removed half her jawbone, but it was too late. Infection spread, and she died before her 18th birthday. You try not to think about it as you work, but the signs are everywhere. Girls rubbing their jaws. Girls with scarves wrapped tight in summer heat. Girls missing teeth in their 20s. The forewoman tells you it's just bad hygiene or weak gums. Nothing to do with the work. But you know the truth. Every time you lift a tray of matches to dip into the yellow phosphorus, you feel it. The invisible enemy that clings to your fingers, slips into your lungs, and waits. You start brushing your teeth more often, even though toothbrushes are a luxury. You rinse your mouth at night until your gums bleed. But deep down, you know, if Phossy Jar wants you, it will take you, and when it does, no one in the factory will say your name. They'll just clear your bench and give it to the next girl at the door. Because here, in the match factory, you are worth less than the phosphorus that poisons you. It starts with whispers, as all dangerous things do. At first, you don't dare join in. Talking about the bosses, the pay, or the working conditions is risky. A wrong word can mean instant dismissal, and there's no shortage of girls desperate enough to take your place. But this time, the whispers don't fade. They grow. It begins in the summer of 1888, with one girl, Mary, small but sharp-eyed, being sacked for something petty. Speaking to a reporter about the fines. Everyone knows the fines are ridiculous. A few minutes late, sixpence gone. A bit of dirt on the match splints. Another fine. Even dropping a finished tray can mean losing a whole day's wages. For many of you, that's the difference between eating and not eating. The reporter she spoke to is Annie Besant, a woman from outside, not a match girl, but one who listens. She writes about the conditions in her paper, calling it white slavery in London. The bosses are furious. They say it's all lies. But you know every word is true. When Mary is dismissed, something changes. Girls start refusing to work. At first, it's just a few of them standing outside the gates. But the anger spreads fast. By the next day, hundreds are out. You join them, your stomach tight but your head high. You've never seen anything like it. The street outside the factory is alive with voices. Some shouting, some laughing in disbelief at their own daring. You're terrified, but also free. Word travels quickly through the East End. People you've never met come to bring bread, tea, even pennies to keep you going. Annie Besant is there, speaking to the crowd, promising to fight alongside you. The bosses tried to scare you back in. They say you'll lose everything. Your wages, your lodgings, maybe even your family's survival. But you've seen too many friends broken by Phossy Jar. Too many children go hungry, while Bryant and May grow rich. You stand your ground. Days pass. You and the others hold meetings in crowded rooms that smell of sweat and tobacco. You draft demands. No more unfair fines, better pay, and an end to the poisonous yellow phosphorus. And then, against all odds, you win. The bosses agree to abolish the fines and rehire the sacked workers. The newspapers call it the Matchgirls strike, and for the first time, people across Britain see Matchgirls not as silent victims, but as fighters. But the victory is not total. The yellow phosphorus still lingers in the air of the factory. The pay is still meager. The work is still deadly. Yet something has shifted in you. In all of you. You've learned that you are not powerless. That even the poorest, most overlooked girls in the East End can shake the foundations of a great company when you stand together. And in a place where silence was survival, that knowledge is worth more than gold. Victory tastes strange. For the first few weeks after the strike ends, you walk through the factory gates with your head higher than before. The fines are gone. Mary is back at her bench, her grin quick and sharp as ever. Annie Besant's name is spoken with warmth in the yard. And you can't help but feel pride. You were part of it. You helped win something. But reality creeps back in fast. The pay is still barely enough to keep the cold out of your bones in winter. And every day, the yellow dust still hangs in the air like a silent curse. You've seen what it does. A girl from your row is missing from her bench one morning. You find out later her jaw began to swell, the bone itself turning black and crumbling. The doctor called it Phossy Jar. She'll be disfigured for life, if she lives at all. The strike had won respect, yes, but not safety. And safety is harder to win. Some of the younger girls start coughing more often, their skin taking on that faint sickly glow. You learn to keep your mouth shut about aches, because being ill can mean losing your place. And no place means no wages. Annie Besant doesn't stop fighting. She and others begin pushing Parliament to ban yellow phosphorus altogether. They bring doctors' reports, photographs, and the stories of women like you into the light. But the bosses fight back hard. Yellow phosphorus is cheap, and profit speaks louder than suffering in most men's ears. Years pass, you get older, your hands are permanently rough, the skin on your fingertips worn thin. Some of your friends marry, most stay where they are. The factory swallows youth and spits out women who look twice their age. But slowly, agonizingly slowly, the pressure builds. The public grows, sickened by the reports. By the turn of the century, even other countries are banning the poison. Britain, stubborn and slow, finally follows. In 1908, 20 years after your strike, yellow phosphorus is outlawed in match production. You were no longer a match girl by then. Your body couldn't take the constant headaches and coughing. But you hear the news, and it feels like a stone lifted from your chest. The fight was long, far longer than any of you imagined, but it was not for nothing. Some say the Matchgirls were just poor girls who got lucky once. You know better. You remember the fear, the hunger, the cold, and still choosing to stand outside those gates in defiance. That's not luck. That's courage. And in the dark corners of London, in rooms where other workers whisper about their own conditions, they still speak of the day the Matchgirls walked out. Because for every girl who struck a match in those years, there's a spark that can't be put out. The day begins in darkness. It's not just the London winter that keeps the streets dim. Your own eyes are still heavy with sleep, the damp in your bones making every movement feel slow. You pull the thin blanket from your shoulders and are met with a rush of cold air so sharp it stings your skin. The single window in your lodging room is cracked at the edges, letting in the wind. The room smells faintly of coal smoke from the street below, a scent that never quite leaves your clothes. There's no breakfast waiting. There rarely is. Maybe a piece of stale bread left from yesterday, if you're lucky. You chew it slowly, because you've learned to make small things last. If you rush it, your stomach will growl all the louder later, and that's a sound you don't want to hear when you're standing at the bench with 10 more hours ahead. The streets outside are already waking, though waking in your part of London means the clatter of carts, the cries of costermongers, and the occasional drunken shout from the alley. The smell of horse manure mingles with coal dust in the fog. You join the small stream of girls heading toward the factory, most wearing patched shawls, skirts frayed at the hem. The younger ones still chatter, but the older ones save their breath. You've all walked this road so many times, it's worn into the soles of your boots. If you have boots at all. Some walk in shoes so thin they might as well be walking barefoot. The factory looms ahead, brick walls blackened by years of soot, tall chimneys coughing grey smoke into the morning sky. The foreman's voice cuts through the chatter, urging you in faster. Time is money, and you're paid by the piece, not the hour. Inside, the warmth is deceptive. It's not the comforting warmth of a hearth. It's a damp, chemical heat that clings to your skin. The first breath burns your throat faintly, the air laced with fine yellow phosphorus dust. You've smelled it so long you hardly notice now, but it's there, settling into your lungs with every inhale. Your bench is a narrow strip of wood with a pile of splints beside it, and a small pot of the gluey phosphorus mixture. Your job is to dip the ends of the wooden sticks into the paste, lay them to dry, then bundle them when hardened. The paste sticks to your fingers, no matter how careful you are, leaving a faint yellow stain. You've even told not to lick your fingers. Everyone has. But you know some do anyway when they're hungry, and can't resist wiping their mouths. Hours pass in a rhythm of dip, lay, bundle, dip, lay, bundle. The only breaks are when the foreman calls for the trays to be moved, or when someone coughs hard enough to stop working. Talking is rare. Too much chatter slows the hands, and slow hands mean fewer finished boxers, fewer pennies. Around midday, you take your break. If you have a lunch at all, it's whatever you brought from home. A crust of bread, maybe a bit of cheese if it was a good week. Most of the girls just sit and rub their aching wrists. You don't have long. 20 minutes and you're back at it. The afternoon is worse. Your fingers cramp, your eyes strain in the dim light filtering through the dirty factory windows. The phosphorus smell grows thicker, the heat from the drying racks heavy and sickly. You notice a girl down the row rubbing her jaw again. You try not to think about what that could mean. By the time the bell finally rings, Your back aches as if you've been bent in half for a week. Your shawl does little against the cold outside, and the sweat you worked up inside chills quickly in the winter air. The walk home is slow. Some girls stop at the pawn shop with bits of clothing or trinkets to sell for supper money. You don't have anything left to pawn. Back in your room, you collapse on the cot, every muscle humming with exhaustion. There's no light but the dim glow of a single candle stub, and you ration it carefully. You think of tomorrow, another day just like this one, and the day after, and the day after that. You've learned that, in the match trade, the days blur together until all that matters is surviving the week. But deep down, you also know that the Matchgirls have done something no one thought possible. You've stood up once before, and perhaps one day, you'll do it again. You never thought much about how the rest of London saw you. Most days, you were too busy working, walking, and trying to stretch a few coins into food. But one summer's morning in 1888, something changed. It began with whispers. A young woman, dressed far better than any of you, had been seen outside the factory gates, talking to some of the girls during their break. She wasn't from management, and she wasn't a foreman's wife. She was Annie Besant, a journalist, with sharp eyes that didn't just glance over you, but seemed to see you. You didn't know it then, but she was gathering your words, turning them into a story that would reach parts of London you'd never set foot in. A week later, the article appeared. White slavery in London. The words leaped from the page like a spark to dry wood. People who never walked through East End streets suddenly spoke about you. The Matchgirls in drawing rooms, in pubs, even in Parliament. They read about your 12-hour days, your meager pay, and the yellow phosphorus that rotted jaws from the inside out. They read about fines that docked your earnings for being late, for talking, for working too slowly, even for things that weren't your fault. The papers called it an outrage. Politicians muttered about reform. Clergymen gave sermons about greed and cruelty. But not everyone believed you. Some said Annie Besant had exaggerated, that the conditions couldn't possibly be that bad. After all, weren't you still alive? Weren't you still working? The factory owners responded in their own way. They called the article lies. They told the public you were treated fairly, that the pay was good enough, and that anyone who didn't like it could leave. Some papers printed those claims, too, and people with no reason to doubt them believed. You felt the weight of being turned into a story, not quite a person, but a symbol. The public liked to pity you, but pity didn't pay your rent. Sympathy didn't feed you. Still, there was power in being noticed. For the first time, you weren't invisible. People in neighborhoods you'd never visit were saying your name, imagining your face. The thought burned quietly in the back of your mind. Maybe, if you could keep their attention, something might change. And then came the moment you hadn't dared hope for. Talk of a strike. It began small, just among a few of the bolder girls, but it grew fast. Annie Besant's article had given you a weapon you'd never had before: public eyes. The question was, would you dare to use it? It started with whispers, then with glances across the workshop tables. The air seemed heavier than usual, but it wasn't just the phosphorus dust. Something was brewing. By July 1888, the tension in Bryant and May's match factory had been stretched so tight it could snap with the smallest pull. Annie Besant's article had lit a spark, and now the flame was spreading. You were used to management's threats. Talk and you'll be fined. Step out of line and you'll be replaced. But this time, something was different. Girls who'd never dared to raise their voices before were speaking boldly during the short meal breaks. The younger ones, barely out of childhood, asked questions that used to stay unspoken. And then it happened. A girl, no older than 17, was sacked without warning. Her crime? Speaking to Besant. The message from management was clear. Anyone who crossed the line would be punished. But instead of frightening you, it lit a fuse. The next morning, as you walked through the gates, you saw knots of girls standing in the yard, refusing to go inside. One by one, others joined them. At first, you hesitated. You needed your wages. You had rent to pay, bread to buy. But then you thought of the fines, the sickness, the aching jaws, and that 17-year-old girl walking home with nothing. You stepped into the crowd. By noon, hundreds of you were outside. The factory floor stood silent. The owners were furious. They sent foremen to threaten you, tried to push you back to work, but the line had been crossed. You were on strike. The decision sent a shock through the East End. Most strikes were led by men, dock workers, builders, tradesmen. But here you were, girls and young women, some no older than 13, defying one of the most powerful companies in London. It wasn't easy. Striking meant no pay, and no pay meant hunger. Many of you pawned the few possessions you owned. Some walked for hours to meetings because you couldn't afford the tram fare. But every time your stomach growled, you reminded yourself, better to go hungry now than to spend a lifetime swallowing poison for pennies. Annie Besant stood with you, helping to organize meetings, speaking to reporters, and keeping your fight in the headlines. Donations began to trickle in from sympathetic Londoners. Not much, but enough to keep you going. For 3 long weeks, you held the line. And slowly, the owners began to bend. Under the pressure of bad publicity and the growing public support for your cause, Bryant and May agreed to talks. When the news came that they would abolish the unfair fines, improve conditions, and listen to grievances, the cheer from the Matchgirls could be heard down the street. It wasn't everything. The phosphorus was still there, the work was still dangerous, and the pay was still meager. But you had won something even more valuable. The proof that you could stand up to power and not be crushed. You'd shown the city that a group of poor East End girls could shake one of London's most profitable businesses. And for the first time, you felt the weight of pride alongside the weariness in your bones. The strike was over, but the fire you'd lit would burn long after the factory gates closed behind you. The strike had ended. The cheers had faded. Life at Bryant and May returned to its rhythm. The clack of match-cutting machines, the coughs echoing across the floor, the faint sweet smell of phosphorus in the air. You'd won the right to fairer treatment, but the poison hadn't gone anywhere. The phosphorus still clung to your hands, your hair, your clothes. You could smell it when you ate, taste it when you swallowed. The company had promised to listen to grievances, but every day you still worked under the same pale yellow haze. And the doctors still came, not to treat, but to declare who was too far gone to be of use. One of the girls from your bench, Mary, didn't return after the strike. Word went round, she'd lost half her jaw to Phossy jaw, and had been sent to the hospital. You knew what that meant. Her chances were slim. It was cruel. The newspapers called your victory historic, but you knew history didn't stop the ache in your teeth or the raw burn in your gums. Every twinge made you wonder if the rot had started in you too. There were whispers of safer chemicals. Red phosphorus, they said, used in other countries. But here in London, the owners claimed it was too expensive, too complicated. So you kept working, because hunger was a quicker killer than phosphorus. Some days you wished the strike had gone further, that you'd demanded the impossible. Other days you just tried to forget, focusing on the coins in your hand at the end of the week and the bread they could buy. Years later, you'd hear that laws had finally been passed to ban white phosphorus in matchmaking. But by then, for many matchgirls, it was far too late. The poison had done its work. And yet, despite the lingering sickness, you carried one truth from those hot summer days of 1888. You had stood together, and you had been heard. No one could take that away. Decades have passed. The factory is quiet now. The clack of machines silenced. The smell of phosphorus long gone. But if you stand on that patch of ground in Bow, you can almost hear the echoes of 1888. The footsteps of hundreds of girls marching in unison. The sharp voices of the foreman. The murmurs of courage passing from one worker to another. You may have left the match factory years ago. Perhaps your teeth grew loose. Or the headaches became too much. Or marriage and children took you away. But the fight you joined did not end with you. The Bryant and May strike became one of the most famous labor victories of its time. Newspapers printed your story far beyond London, and working women across Britain began to believe that they too could stand up to their employers. In the years that followed, more labor laws were passed to protect workers, not just for matchmakers, but for women and children in every trade. In 1910, white phosphorus was finally banned in Britain, ending the slow, quiet deaths that had haunted your workroom. But the cost was high. Many of your friends never saw that day. Some were buried in unmarked graves, their names forgotten by all, but the few who loved them. Others lived, but carried the scars, missing jaws, chronic illness, or the constant ache of poverty. And yet, you changed the world. You didn't set out to make history. You only wanted fair pay, safe work, and dignity. But in speaking up, you lit a spark. One that traveled across Britain, across oceans, into factories and workshops you would never see. Today, when someone strikes for better conditions, your spirit walks beside them. When workers demand safety over profit, your voices rise in theirs. And every time a match is struck without the deadly bite of phosphorus, it burns in your honor. You were poor, tired, and often sick. But you dared to stand together when the world told you to bow. You may not have lived to see all you dreamed of, but your courage lit more than candles. It lit a path